We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Welcome to Toward Anarchy. Thank you so much for joining me in my little digital sandbox. Play for a little while, hang out for a bit. I appreciate you listening in and hanging out with me. It's a fun little ride. You can find me just about anywhere. It's at Toward Anarchy on Facebook and Instagram and X, and at towardanarchy.com. That's the place to really find me anytime, any place, any day of the week. I'm always there. It's my representation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it kind of gives you an idea of what I've been up to the previous week. If you go and look, you can go and sort of browse through the links and things that I had shared from the previous week, and you could see what I was talking about and what was on my mind and what's going on in the world. And there's wonderful, great quotes like the great Bill Hicks from last week. I ascribe to a philosophy of gentle anarchy. I believe people are inherently good, and left to their own devices with the free exchange of ideas and information, a joyful lightness would spread across the face of our dour world. As Bill Hicks had said that last week. That just happened to be the quote from last week. I don't know. It popped into my head again as I'm sitting here getting ready to start the show, and I thought, oh, you know what? We need to share that one again. We need to reiterate that. If you go to towardanarchy.com and you do want to follow along, look for episode 2602. We're early on in 26, obviously, and wow, crazy events so far. In fact, we could spend the entire show here just talking about the events of the last 24 hours or so, 48 hours, whatever it's been. It hasn't been very long since the woman was killed in Minneapolis, and then ICE agents killed a couple other people just not too long after that. And that story hasn't even really come to the surface because of all the other stories. They just released body cam. It's not body cam footage. They claim it was body cam footage originally, but it's actually cell phone footage. It's cell phone footage. The individual, the cop is walking around holding their cell phone and using their cell phone to walk around the car and get the license plate and get an image of the car and the people in it and everything. And so there's a disconnect between what they say is the body cam footage. It's not body cam footage. It's cell phone footage. And some places are saying it's cell phone footage. Other places have said it's body cam footage. And they just released it, and they released it without the gunshots. So you can't tell when the gunshots are actually fired. All you see is one officer who's in no danger of walking around a moving vehicle, a vehicle that's going back and forth, and being that somebody is still driving and still in, basically, and hasn't made up their mind where they can or will be going. And so he's fully aware of the situation and perfectly able to get out of the way. And this is all I'm going to say about it, because I don't care. Again, all of you statists can just start off your civil war and kill each other off. I don't care. I'm not playing the game. I won't be joining you in your battle because there's no battle. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but the only thing I'm going to say about it is that it's murder. Plain, period, and simple. They have no lawful, legal reason to be on the street, not according to the founding documents of this nation, not according to the laws of the individual cities and states that they have been in. They are violating their own rules for operation in terms of the way they're handling things. Certainly, everybody running around talking about she gets what she deserves. She went there to cause a problem, something like that. It's interesting to see liberals make that argument when they didn't the Republicans, the conservatives, making that argument that she shouldn't have been there. She shouldn't have been in that place at that time, that she had no business being there. These are the exact same people that would have argued that that was a BS argument if it came to Kyle Rittenhouse, that he could be there. He should be there. He was asked to be there. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever anybody's statement of why he could or should be there. Here's the bottom line. People can be wherever the hell they want. The people that can't be wherever the hell they want and do whatever the hell they want are masked, armed gunmen roaming our streets, violating people without due process of law. Those are what's called open targets. Those are, if somebody gets a shot, take it. No problem. These people deserve what they get. How do you like that for serving it up? If you want to play live by the sword, die by the sword arguments, then every single one of those ICE agents needs to die and deserves to die. How do you feel about that? You like that argument? Then stop using it against other people. This argument about, oh, she should have just complied. Oh, if she'd just listen. Oh, if they just listen. If they just do what the cops tell them to do, is the same argument that puts you on the train. In case you haven't figured that one out yet, you're on the train. Get on the train. Go right along with the rest of them. Get on there. Don't fight back. Don't question authority. And it's also the same argument as you shouldn't have worn that dress. It really truly is. It's the exact same argument. Look, in anywhere, I don't care where it is. I don't even care about America at this point and so-called rights or anything. If you're out there, anywhere, for whatever reason, clearly she's not violating any laws. She's not harming anybody. She may be sort of violating political and social opinions at the moment, but it's obvious. There's nothing to suggest that she's done anything criminal there. Keep arguing that she's blocked the road. She hasn't blocked the road. The road is not blocked. The car just went past. You see another vehicle just go past them. You hear them. They're telling each other to just go around. They could have gone around. They could have done whatever they want, but no. They wanted to get out. They want to make a record. The cop jumps out. He's all, woo, you're hot to trot. Grabs his cell phone, not a body cam, grabs his cell phone and goes around the car and starts filming and everything. And he has all the time in the world. She's moving the car back and forth. She's deciding whether or not to leave. Then this other guy comes and runs up and grabs at her door, and she tries to drive off, and the other cop is kind of in front of the vehicle, could have very easily moved out of the way. He pulls out his pistol, he shoots her in the face, and then he shoots her 2 more times through the driver's window. He's already passed it. That's it. It happened that fast. People are saying and that she revved up to get him. No, she wasn't. She was backing up to pull out, to get away. She was trying to get away from the guy who was trying to open her door. She saw the guy. You can tell she sees the guy. She follows him. She acknowledges him once, but he goes all the way around the back of the car, comes all the way back around again, and gets back in her line of sight, puts himself in front of the vehicle. And as I was saying, that's against their rules. They're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to use that as an excuse to kill somebody. The vehicle is not necessarily, and somebody driving it away is not necessarily grounds for you to execute somebody. We all know this in a general sense. If I did it, I would go to prison. If somebody else did it, they would go to prison. But this guy has magical powers that allow him to get away with murdering people on the streets, murdering innocent people on the streets. This woman did nothing to no one. I don't care what any of the rest of you think about the law or the rule of law and what she should or shouldn't be doing with her time, because once again, I'll turn you right back to the Kyle Rittenhouse argument, and we will go nowhere with that. We will end it. That's the end of it right there, because you used you said he had the right to go anywhere he wants at a time. It didn't matter whether it was riots or whatever, that he had the right to go and defend his his home and his place and his space and his other friend's space and this place and that place and anything else. He can go anywhere he wants. He's an American. He can go anywhere he wants in America on public property, on the roads, anywhere he wants to that's not on private property where he hasn't been told to get off. Period. End of discussion. And for whatever reason you fabricate after that, we're going to get into another one of these. This is a long one. You just had to sit back and get ready for this one, because I haven't even started talking about dealing drugs yet. I just had to get this out of the way because there's going to be arguments about it and all this, and it's murder. That's it. That's all there is to it. It's murder. And this is coming from someone who carries a gun, who has carried a gun every single day of his life since he was legally able to do so, we'll just say, and has had to, on several occasions, be prepared to defend himself using his firearm, and that's other firearms pointed at me and other people I know. That's people using physical threats and physical violence against me, as in they're imminent. Danger is imminent. It's actually happening in the moment. It's not a case of I put myself in a situation where I shouldn't be. Let's give you a chance at that argument. It's not even the case. And I've never had to kill anybody. I've never had to shoot anybody. Why would I? The reason you carry a gun is to have the greater force. And so that people who are not armed, people who are not an actual danger to you, you leave them alone. You've won the battle already. You've already won. That's it. They had already won in this instance. All you had to do was get back in his vehicle and drive off. That's all any of them had to do. I'm going to leave it at that, because I just don't want to talk about it. I think it's just for you statists. It doesn't matter. In the real world, where nobody gets special permission to go around robbing, caging, and murdering other people for whatever excuse, with the color of their skin, the sound of their last name, the religion, whatever it is, in the world where you don't get that special permission, you get shot in the face when you do stupid stuff like that, when you try to accost people on the street, when you try to pull them out of their vehicle, when you try to make them do what you want them to do, when you have no right to make anyone do anything that they don't want to do. And that's the real question about whether or not she was justified or he was justified or whatever it is, or whoever you think is right in this situation. The real question is, in the real world where they don't have special permission to rob, cage, and murder people, what is the response to them charging at your vehicle? Running through them if you need to, putting bullets in their head if you need to, killing them, stopping them before they harm you, before they take from you. That's what you would do in the real world, and that's what it should be here in America, because America was supposed to be the real world, right? It was supposed to be the place where the state recognized that it didn't have the authority to go around just rounding up people, any people, for whatever excuse that it wants. It doesn't matter if they are actually citizens or not. They're on American soil and they have right to due process. If they don't have a right to due process, nobody has a right to due process. Nobody gets to do this at all. We all are just victims of folly, victims of the system. We don't have rights. We have suggestions. We have, what did George Carlin call it? The temporary bill of suggestions or something like that. They don't exist. They're not real. And of course, we're real. So those things that are codified within those rights are real. They're absolutely 100% real, because they speak about the reality of things, not the legality of things, the reality of things. And the reality of things is nobody has the right to silence you. Nobody has the right to stop you from worshiping and believing as you want to, and speaking out and saying what you want to say and putting yourself out there. Nobody. It doesn't say that there's a protection from you doing so. It just says that there's no legal authority that can do it. There's no legal authority that can take your right of self-defense away from you. That's what America is based on. The idea that we could defend ourselves and our property, and that the king just couldn't decide that he wants to take it. I don't care if you call the king a president. I don't care if you call him a mayor or an ICE agent. If they come and they're coming for you, and they're going to, even if they're not coming for you, if they're going to go through you to get to somebody else in complete disregard of your right to be there by the First Amendment, by the Second Amendment, by the Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, all of the amendments, these, I'm trying to speak to you in terms that you can understand as a statist, because that's what you are. You're a statist. You believe in the rule of law, and that's what is your driving factor, right? What's the real difference between the statist and the anarchist? This question has been asked of me before, and I've given the answer, and it's really quite a simple one. You guys, the statists, you as a statist, you care about your system and your so-called rule of law. And the anarchist, me, I care about people and what's right. The system and the rules that you've created for yourselves, or that were created for you and that you're willing to follow along with, I guess, are only put in place for control, to manipulate you. They don't represent any reality, because the only reality is individuals dealing with other individuals on a human level, and dealing with the violations of each other directly. This system is set up to protect the system, not us. They don't protect us. They don't prevent crimes. Their rules, their laws, their codes, none of that prevents any crime. You know what prevents crime? Armed citizens prepared to defend themselves, prepared to put bullets in the faces of armed gang members wearing masks, regardless of whether or not they believe they have some right to do it. That's what the founding of America is about, and I try to speak to you statists in your language so you'll understand what friggin' hypocrites you are when you say that one person has a right that another person doesn't have a right to when you're talking about America, because there's no ambiguous language. The only people looking for ambiguous language in our rights are the people who want to take your rights away. That's it. Those are the only people that are looking to find a reason to, a well-regulated militia. Well, that means that it's not people, that it's, they're regulated and they have to be controlled, and all the weapons and the guns and the armor and everything has to be controlled, when that's not what it means at all. It's not even close to what it means. It's ridiculous. And the idea that we can't speak out, that we can't go to another state or another place 350 miles away and leave the children at home to protest an injustice, to protest armed thugs, mask-wearing gang members roaming our streets at will, kidnapping people, extraordinary rendition, just snatching them up off of the streets with no due process, no rights, nothing. And how many does it take to be wrong? One. That's all. That's all, because we all, again, speaking to you in your terms about your society, about your system, about your wonderful America, about your beautiful democracy, about all of it. In your language, they don't have the right to do that. But you're letting them and you're cheering them on. And you're doing it because of the color. You're afraid of the color of their skin. You're afraid they're going to take your job. Really? Really? Some guy crawling out of the desert on his hands and knees, dragging his family, looking for food and a job is going to take your job? Maybe you better skill up. There's actually a little quote to go with that. It just kind of fits in this time. It doesn't always. I don't always have the quote to just drop right in there for a particular situation. But if they're coming for your jobs, are you one of those people that likes to talk about wage gaps and income gaps and wealth gaps, but you don't want to talk about skill gaps, effort gaps, and talent gaps? If they're coming for your job, maybe you better skill up. That was Zuby who said that, by the way, that like people like to talk about wage gaps, income gaps, and wealth gaps, but they never talk about skill gaps, effort gaps, and talent gaps. So frustrating to be sitting here and watching what's happening and not really be able to do anything about it. Sure, I can talk about it and I can tell everybody, how I feel about it and what the interpretation, what the real language is in our founding documents and what words actually mean. And I can go through all this, but you guys don't care. You don't care. You just care about your stupid system and your rule of law. And this is what your stupid system and your rule of law gets you. When you're not in charge anymore, when your team's not running the show, they're coming after you, Christian. They're coming after you, gun owner. They're coming after you, person who drives a gas car, person who can hunt and prepare a buck for dinner and feed themselves and not have to worry about it. They're coming for you when they're back in charge. That's how it works. So you are going to reap what you sow. All the hatred, all the anger, all the excuses that you make for murder, and yes, I'm clearly speaking to the people on the right now. All of the excuses that you're making right now for the actions of ICE, for the actions of the current president, for this administration, for law enforcement on a daily basis, they're all going to come back to you when somebody else makes the rules, and that's the way it goes. If you're lucky, you'll be dead by then. You won't live to see it. But the reality is that it only takes 4 years. That's all it takes. Not even that necessarily. So good luck with the next administration for those of you who have decided that you're not on the side of truth and liberty and the right and caring about people, when you're really, truly just on the side of the system and you're sacrificing yourself and everyone else to it. And your time will come. And again, maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe it won't come. But you do believe that there's an ultimate payback at the end of all this. A lot of you who are on the right call yourselves Christians, and you believe that there's a sort of a karmic balance, if you will, that comes in the end. Which side do you think God's on, if there is such a God? Do you think that God believes that okay, so this was one of the things with the Carlin routine, right? Wasn't one of the things that he said about the rights is he sort of went to different places in the world and talked about how they had different numbers of rights and different types of rights and rights in sort of different languages and different things. Sort of have a right to a home or a right to food or whatever it is. And there's all these various different rights and things in different places around the world, and constitutions and bills of rights and similar such documents that suggest that there are many more freer people in other places, but then again there are also many more enslaved people in other places, and your God created this system and created all of this and created this imbalance. We didn't create this imbalance. If our nature is human and the nature is to have something like this happen, then isn't that just like the trickster God game thing? Isn't that just a little weird to think that your God would say, well, brown people only get 3 rights and the black people over there, they only get 4 rights, and these people over here, well, they're the chosen, they get 12. Well, not 12, only 10, because we started with 13 and then we trimmed it down, but then we only need 10 because 10 really just kind of it makes a statement. It's such a weird thing. It's such a hypocritical thing, and it seems like people just pay a lot of lip service to ideologies, and that's why you're never going to catch me on the wrong side of an argument. I challenge people all the time to find me on the wrong side of an argument, because I'm always going to come down on the side of the individual, particularly the individual who hasn't harmed someone else. An individual who's acting voluntarily, who's acting consciously about his reality and with the people around him, so that he doesn't cause undue problems for other people. It's really an easy thing to do, to stay out of other people's way. it's something that I practice as an armed person. I stay out of other people's way. I know that I have the upper hand in almost any battle, whether the person who's coming up against me does or not. So I stay away from them. I try not to get into arguments with people. I try not to have any sort of situation where they're going to come at me. I purposely avoid those situations knowing that I have the upper hand, and I guess that other people just don't think as consciously and feel as consciously in their existence, and they just don't, maybe they really don't care or know. They're just completely unaware. I don't know what it is, and it's a sad thing to watch because I still don't see myself as being particularly different than anyone else. I gave you the one difference that was there, but as in terms of being a man and being a human, I'm no different than anybody else. I'm as capable or incapable depending on what the thing is and what I know and how to deal with whatever it is. There's nothing particularly special about me that says that I should have any particular insight or knowledge or understanding necessarily, and yet here we are. I do, and I look at it from a certain point of view, and that point of view is that there's a subset of the population, of the people of any given population or people, that believe that everyone else should think and feel like they do instead of letting just everybody be who they are and think and feel the way they do, and the only conflict is when somebody violates person or property. No, so they have to set up the system around it, and they have to create all these things to sort of insulate themselves from not only what they do. That's the most important thing, to insulate themselves. That's what it becomes as it gets later. Initially, it's, we have to set up these systems to protect the weak, to protect the poor, to protect the needy, to protect those who can't protect themselves, except they're never given a chance to protect themselves. That's the true reality of it. So that's used as an excuse to create this system of controls and manipulations. And instead of doing what the mandate was for America and for justice, was for to take actual actions, the things that people have done, and those are the things that you move forward with when dealing with someone. What they say and who they are and the color of their skin and all these other things, they don't matter. It's what they do. And maybe there's some thin lines between saying and doing. These are all instances that you have to deal with as they happen. So and that was the whole point. Right? You deal with these things as they happen, not set up a system that's supposed to punish people through being able to just push them through the system. All right, we have 50 cases today. We have to just run through them. Well, here's the case law. Boom, you're busted. Boom, you're busted. Not listening to anybody's arguments. They're just they're not even given a defense, generally speaking. Most of the claims of violations by people, by the state are fines. They don't involve other people. They are not crimes. They are victimless. And that's the big thing that I wanted to talk about today. There's a couple other things I want to hit, but we're going to get to that too. But just in this general sense of all these other things that are going on, this craziness that's happening around us right now, I was asked if I was worried about it, if I was concerned at all about it. Do I feel like things are about to pop off? And that was the language that was used. And I said, no, I don't worry about it. I'm not worried about it because myself and most of the people I care about in any way, shape, or form have nothing to do with your political battle. That's what this is. This is a political battle. It's not about people. It's about the differences brought up by political division, because if you just would leave each other the hell alone, everyone would be fine. But no, there's a political system, so you guys have to battle each other for control over it, and you leave us in a bad place. And I said, no, we're not involved. We're not going to get involved. You guys want to fight a civil war, you'll fight it without us. We won't be involved in it, and we will sit back and laugh at you. Even when you're dead, we will sit back and laugh at you and laugh at how futile and stupid you are for sacrificing your life for nothing, for a system that doesn't need you, doesn't care about you, only wants to rob you, only has you within its existence so that it can take from you because it produces nothing for itself. So no, I'm not worried about it. Am I worried about something popping off? Whoa. Okay, that's a weird question. Not just because it's, modern language. It's popping off now. What are you talking about? What are we talking about when you ask a question like that? Well, what do you mean? Are you looking for a big triggering event or something like that? Because that's not how it happens. There's no shot heard round the world. There's no single triggering event. It's just the end result of a million little cuts. If you're waiting around for a single event, something that sends you over the top, you're waiting for something in your backyard. There is no event. That's just not how it works. It just doesn't happen that way. And so we're all dying of a million little cuts out here. And so people are looking for this. That's why they ask a question like this, is what I'm trying to get at. The reason they ask a question like, do you think something's about to pop off, is because they're looking for that trigger event. They're looking for that one thing that puts them in motion to go and do something about what's happening. Right? That's what people are looking for. They say, oh, that's my cue. That's what they're waiting for. And in case you're wondering, now is the time to fight back. And I don't mean that now as in like yesterday's events have now triggered this fight that you need to wage, that we all need to wage. That's not it at all. I certainly don't mean through any sort of useless ballot box, voting or anything like that. That's not going to help the situation. No, if you want to fight back, you should be fighting back all the time. You fight back by taking your time, your energy, your wealth, your attention, all of yourself out of the political system, out of this game of divide and conquer, so that a small number of lazy, useless, stupid people can prop themselves up using your money and everything else. They'll take everything from you. They'll take it all from you. So you need to take it back, and you need to be doing it every single day. You be you. You do you. You act voluntarily with other people. You shop in black and gray markets. You avoid the state-sanctioned theft, the taxes. You avoid paying taxes at every opportunity, every chance you get. Discounts, whatever it happens to be, paying in cash, finding whatever it is. I'm not telling anybody to do anything illegal, so you just take that, just stop. I'm telling you that you don't have to do illegal things to insulate yourself from the system. If you play your cards right, you pay less taxes or no taxes. Most of us don't really pay taxes. Most of us, even if we pay taxes over the year, get our money back. So let's not pretend that there aren't ways to get around this. And again, shop in the black and gray markets all day long. There's probably so many more things, so many different other ways that you can fight back. But the point is it's not a new fight. You're not waiting around for a triggering event. That's not what we're waiting for. You fight back now. You fight back every single day by being you and taking everything you can out of the system. And that's not, I don't mean welfare. I'm not talking about taking from the system that has already taken from other people. I mean taking yourself out of the system so that it can't take anything more from you. This is the battle. That is the fight that everybody's fighting. Well, I've posted, that if you're wondering, the time is now. Right now, it's time to fight back right now. And invariably, when saying something like that, somebody will respond to me suggesting, how do you fight back against them? You're not a patriot. I got that one. You're no patriot. You're just a fake. And it was literally for saying that it's time to fight back. And of course, and it's just leaving it as that statement. If you're wondering, now is the time to fight back. That's it. And the idea is that somebody engages with you, but if they just hit and run like so many of you cowards do out there, you just say one thing and then you block somebody. I mean, it's hilarious. It just happened most recently to me on the social media after posting that, and a guy jumps up there and he calls me names and tells me I'm a loser or whatever, and immediately blocks and bails out, and so you can't click on their name, you can't go to their page, you can't do any of that. But you can if they have an open profile, because all you have to do is just switch to one of your other pages. I have a dozen different pages. I switch to a page, type in a person's name, there they are, there's their profile. So he snipes me. He hits this, you're a piece of trash, whatever, how dare you say that. And it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. I could give you the exact wording, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. Maybe I will at some point. I don't know. But it just doesn't change anything because it's the act itself. It's the hit and run. It's the assassination thing. And so he does that. And I'm curious because I had no idea who this person is. And that happens a lot. They'll be friends or something like that. And it'll be the first time I've ever heard from them. And it'll be something negative or something dismissive of something that I've said. And I'm curious to know who they are. I don't do a lot of stalking at all on Facebook. I really don't care and don't spend that much time on Facebook. But when something like that happens, I had to go see. Oh, all right. Well, let's go check this out. What exactly did happen here? Who is this guy? And so I switched to one of my other pages. I type the guy's name in. I pull up his page, and literally the very first thing that's on there, he has a semi-open page. I have a fully open page. We're talking about Facebook. All my pages are open as the apps or software or web page or whatever will let you be. A lot of them, the social media, they don't let you see anything unless you're a member. But at any rate, if as long as you're in the system, if you're in Facebook, you can see everything on my page, everything I've ever posted. It's completely open. Nothing is hidden from the public. It's all open. And anyone can friend me. Anyone can comment or like on my stuff. I don't care. This guy's page is semi-open. You can see most of his stuff and his things, but you can't comment on him. You can't do anything with him. And so I just take this real quick peek because I just have to know. And literally the very first post is about him. He's saying how all of these liberals get mad at him when he says something and they jump and hit and run on him and then block him. The same thing he had just done to me was the most recent thing that he was talking about the other people doing to him. You're a bunch of goddamn hypocrites. All of you statists. My God. It's just you and I today. And there is so much to talk about and so much to catch up on. I just wanted to do this. I didn't want to have any guests. Because it's been weeks of collecting stories and reading things and events happening, and I've really not commented on any of it. I've kind of avoided any of it and really just haven't been, most of it, there was no show. The network is down, so I take those weekends off as well. Holidays, why not? It's a perfect opportunity. It makes perfect sense. The network's not going to be around. Cool. I'm going to take some time off too. Everybody gets a little break from me. I get a little break from everybody. It all works out. It's all a very fantastic and wonderful process, and so I take the days off sometimes. But it just left us with a gap, and there's just so much to go over, and so I'm going to try to hit on a bunch of these things. Go to towardanarchy.com. It's 2602. That's the episode. And there's a couple of links up there. I didn't go heavy on the links today. I really kind of avoided the links because I just wanted to talk. And all of this should be stuff that you know. And what I did, I purposely jotted down a couple of notes on specific things that I wanted to mention, that if you want to go find more about them, it's everywhere. It's information that's everywhere. Because one of the reasons that I want you to do it that way is because I think you have to go and sift through the information to find what's true and what's right. You cannot really sit and let it come to you ultimately, especially if you have some blinders, for whatever reason it is, whether it's just your statism in general, or whether it's maybe you're Christian and you have some higher moral value that you ascribe to your being versus other people's being, and you don't want to sort of get involved and be around with them and have to things. Well, it would be great if y'all could do that without using the state to try to force each other to do things, but to get back into it and to just go through, so I feel like I'm not doing a disservice. One of the things that happens is I'll pop those links up there, and I'll rely on the idea that if you want to talk about the links, if you want that information, the links are there. You can just go. You can go check them out every time. Whereas I can be telling you the information and a lot of these things and giving you the information that you need to know, and then you can just go. You go and you find it, because it's crazy right now. It's almost impossible. There's so many, the artificial intelligence is one of them. Economics is one of them. Obviously, the politics is one of them. There are these things. There's information out there, important topics that, depending on who you're listening to, you're getting a completely different story. It's so weird. The economics thing is one of the biggest, and so I thought maybe that I would concentrate on that just a little bit. I'm not even going to spend a lot of time on it. I just had some very specific thoughts on these economic claims, because that's what they are. It'll be one source claiming something about the economy and another one claiming about the economy, and all they're talking about, and I've warned you about this, I've talked about this so often, they're always talking about these lagging indicators, these things that are so far behind what's actually happening in the economy. If you want to understand the economy, understand money, and understand why it is people will work to resolve their wants and needs using economic means. Once you understand that, all the rest of it falls into place. When you read a headline, you automatically know what's in there. You understand it because you realize the difference between actually telling somebody what's important in economics and telling somebody about economic activity that supports your particular worldview. Do you understand the difference between these two things? I hope I don't have to explain them to you, because if I do, you're not going to understand that there's a reason why there would be a separation between those things and why one of these things would be more important than the other. It's absolutely important to understand why people will work to resolve their wants and needs using economic activity and economic functions. It is another thing to understand what individual, or even worse, the macro of an economy is doing, because that's all about guesswork for manipulators, people who are manipulating the markets, or they're trying to get one up on the markets. And that's what a lot of the manipulation information is about. It's about betting. It's about making gambles on the economy. And so the information, it's really hard to trust, because from one source it's going to be gambling on their political ideology, and from another source it's gambling on another political ideology, whereas none of them are actually talking about the real true economics of the things. And so that's what I'm going to try to hit you with just a little bit, just to wrap up this last hour. And then in the next hour, we are going to get down to dealing drugs. Is it a crime? Is it a victimless crime? I have a whole bunch of just different angles to come at that from these conversations that I've had with people, and just going through the various thoughts on it. But I'm going to do the same thing with you here with the economic stuff, just to finish out the hour. And so let's start with some things that are headlines. So trade deficit is the lowest since 2009. That's a headline, or it's an alteration of a headline. I don't think I copied any of the headlines exactly, just the important information. That way you can go look it up. That way you're not looking for the title of a particular article. You're actually just looking for the information that I'm talking about. They claim that the trade deficit is the lowest since 2009. But what you have to understand about that even if it's true, it's not because foreigners are buying more American goods. You understand what they claim the trade deficit is, right? There's really no such thing as a trade deficit. But what they claim the trade deficit is that we're buying more foreign goods than we are selling foreign goods, okay? It would be the same to say that McDonald's isn't buying as much from my comic book shop as I buy from McDonald's. That's not a trade deficit. There's no such thing as a trade deficit. It's a lie. It's a complete lie. It's a complete attempt to manipulate economy and give an excuse to manipulate the economy so that these people who produce nothing, the politicians, the scumbags, and all the scumbags that work for them, the ones that carry the badges and the ones that shuffle the paperwork, all of them, that's just how they get paid. That's it. It has nothing to do with any real, their manipulations are how they get paid. If they didn't manipulate, they couldn't get paid, because they couldn't create crisis, or they couldn't use crisis as an excuse to give themselves power and get themselves paid ultimately. So it's not. So the trade deficit is the lowest since 2009, but it's not because foreigners are buying more American goods. It's because Americans are having to pay more for the foreign goods, because it's about dollars. That's another thing about the GDP. We'll get to it next, the gross domestic product, because it's about total dollars. And total dollars are a huge manipulation of things, because, again, I will argue until I'm blue in the face, there's no such thing as a macro economy. There's only a micro economy. It's individual transactions. Everything above that is an attempt to guess at the larger totality of all of the individual transactions so that they can pass legislation, so they can adjust rates, so that they can gamble in the back rooms, and they can tell each other the secrets, and they can buy the airplane stocks before the airplane flies into a building, or whatever it is. Not that anybody has ever done that before. 600% up over the months leading up to 9/11. That's whatever. Just gotta throw a little conspiracy-minded stuff in there for everybody, right? And we're not catering to everybody. We're not pandering enough. And the money they pay is taken by government. The money that we pay out to buy these foreign goods, it doesn't go to the foreign corporation. It goes to the bottom line of the government, and the government is the one that tells you that there's a trade deficit, because they make more money if they can claim that there's a trade deficit and force things like tariffs on people. You see how that works? If they force you to pay more money, then they close the deficit, because you pay more money for the same goods. In fact, it's the same goods and less of them because people back off from the tariffs naturally. And so less people are buying less things from overseas, but they're costing so much more money that the trade deficit, the trade gap is being closed. That's the lie for you. So that's number one. So I said GDP, right? So gross domestic product. You know what gross domestic product is, right? Gross domestic product is the total dollar value of all final goods and services. Everything that America creates and puts out there it's the total worth of it all, supposedly. And so what we're seeing is that the GDP has shot up. That's the headline, basically. GDP shoots up. GDP shot up over the last few months or whatever. And note, do remember that there's missing data in there. Remember, right? The government was shut down for a while, so there's a whole bunch of missing data. Well, it's not really missing. It's out there. The data is there to be had, and we'll probably cover some of it as we're getting up there. But just remember that there's missing data that's very conveniently missing for the government. And they said I remember Trump said something about they'll probably never recover that data. That data will never be available to them. Now, that's not true. Not true at all, because there are any number of other organizations that are watching what the government is doing and what the government claims, and is also watching the same numbers and has access to those same numbers as well. So the only thing that would be missing would be the lies from government necessarily. Other lies from other people could be in place, but the numbers are there. The information is there to be found. So gross domestic product has shot up. Well, you already understand that prices have gone up, costs have gone up, but accelerated output is also to be expected at a sort of late stage collapse like this, because it's a race to the bottom for the money. The money is racing to the bottom, and so everybody is following it. People, business, government, everybody's following it to the bottom. So accelerated output, when you should actually not be outputting more stuff, is actually something that happens. It's what helps drive stagflation. It gets us to the point where we are now, where the growth is slowing or is completely slowed. And of course, again, size. I started to say something about that earlier. America is so big. It's never been done on this scale before, the manipulations and the control. And you're seeing that it doesn't work. It didn't work on the smaller scale. So why is it going to work on the bigger scale? It's not. And why is anything going to change? Do we understand this? We don't have to go over this again, right? We understand that the reason that the economy would change, why the economy would get better, is because something was being done differently, right? Because we were doing things a certain way and the economy went bad. I'm not ascribing anything to it. We were doing things one way. The economy went bad. We think the economy is getting better, but we're still doing everything the same way. Nothing has changed. Not a single thing has changed about how the economy is managed or how the government manages the economy and the manipulations that it participates in. So the economy cannot get better, period. That's it. You have to have a fundamental change, and that fundamental change has to be the end of manipulation of money and the markets, and that's never going to change. That's never going to end, because that's what government thrives on. So what we're really seeing is a result of these manipulated markets and the value of the dollar as it sinks and the cost of goods rises. That's why GDP has shot up. It's not because things are better. It's because things are worse. And I get it that's not, people don't like to hear things like that. They like to imagine that no matter what, that when that things work in the direction, the idea, just to throw this out there real quick, the idea that there's climate change and that it was called global warming, and that global warming could create global cooling is antithetical to the idea of global warming, right? But it's actually a reality in the sense that that's what would happen, that if you change, if you raise up the temperatures, you melt the ice cools the flow of the oceans, the natural current flow of the oceans, because the water gets colder, and water changes, obviously, as things get colder, they slow down, right? That's what happens to things that get colder. That's all the atoms and everything. It just slows down. It gets slower and slower until it freezes as it continues to get colder and colder, and that's stopped. Right? That's what happens to the oceans. So the idea, I know that there's a lot more to this conversation in there, but it's just this idea that just because one thing appears to be one way or is phrased one way doesn't mean that it can't cause something completely different than what it sounds like. Now, I'm not going to argue about the sort of possibility of climate change and whether or not man's responsible or whether or not he can do anything about it. I'm just simply pointing out that very weird anomaly that it can be true in any kind of statement like that. When I'm talking about this GDP, when I'm talking about the value of the dollar, and how the cost of goods can rise and the dollar goes down, and all of these things, how they tie together, they may not seem to make a lot of sense, but they can have the exact opposite effect, as I was saying, that when you're pushing so hard, I guess, in one direction, it kind of falls out the other direction sometimes. There's so many different examples that just kind of burn through my head so fast that I can't even really grab onto one, because none of them are really perfect examples, other than that climate change thing where, yes, global warming can cause it to be colder in other places. The global rise in temperature would cause melting of ice. Melting of ice would cause cooling of the oceans. Cooling of the oceans would cause a change in the current. They flow at the speed they flow, at the temperature they flow, and that speed changes as the temperature lowers. And so it could cause global cooling from global warming. These two, they're the same thing. They're the flip side of a coin, and it's a balance. And that's the important part to remember, and is that there's a balance. And then it's a natural balance, and it's the same with economics. It's the same with the climate, and so there's a possibility that, yes, something can offset that and cause an imbalance in it, and it's just the clearest, most obvious argument of something appearing one way but actually coming out different on the other end. And I think that's true of almost everything that government does when it talks about the economy and it manipulates the economy. It says it's for one thing. It's always for something else. It's always some other manipulation, because the truth is that if one part of the economy is bad, well, that's just one part of the economy that's bad. It only gets bad for everybody else when we're all tied to that part of the economy. We're not all naturally tied to every other part of the economy, except through the connection of government and the redistribution of wealth that occurs through government. That you understand? I hope you understand this. Because it's not really that hard to understand. Even if I don't say it particularly clearly, it's not that hard to understand. Not at all. Okay, so we're getting really, really close to the top of the hour here. And there's just a few more things to cover on the economics, so we'll do that. I'll hit these numbers, and I'll bring it all together for you, drop a couple other things on you, and then we'll finish talking about this idea that, what brought it up was drugs. That selling drugs is ultimately a victimless crime. Is that something you believe? There are a lot of people that don't believe that. And there are a lot of people that do believe that, and there are a lot of people that don't understand the difference between a simple transaction and a claim of the idea that something shouldn't be criminalized just by its very nature. Again, a violation of person or property. Those are crimes. Voluntarily selling something to somebody that voluntarily buys it and wants it, that's not a crime. And so we'll get into the details of that and more when we get back here on the second hour of Toward Anarchy. Stick around.
You lack imagination, Destro. We possess the ultimate weapon of control. People trust television. It's their friend. They believe what television tells them about the news, the weather. Don't you see? We control the creation of truth.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. The air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crying in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. My life has value.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Okay, here we go. Off into hour number 2, TowardAnarchy.com to follow along, at Toward Anarchy everywhere else on the internet. And if it's not at Toward Anarchy, it's probably not me. I don't know why anybody would want to pretend to be me or present themselves as me, but people get spoofed all the time, and especially people that have even meager, humble, fantastic audiences like I myself do. TowardAnarchy.com to follow along. 2602 is the episode, and we're going to get into dealing drugs. Hopefully I didn't lose you back in the weeds back there with that whole clumsy analogy about how the most obvious thing that's going to happen or should happen that you expect to happen isn't always the thing that happens, even if it seems like the most logical thing to happen. Because usually they're multifaceted ideas, right, that require a little bit more thinking than just a simple what we get presented with, a sort of left-right presentation of things, which is usually the case. It's usually something political like that ultimately. Sometimes there's something else behind it, a social movement, some ideology like that, but oftentimes it's a political thing for sure. And to be able to look at things and reason through them as to why an event or a thing would happen or why this thing behaves this way in a place and time without it being obscured, and manipulated by that sort of political or social whatever it is that those things do to things. The social thing doesn't matter so much without the political thing. It's when the social ideology captures the political ideology that you begin to experience division like we have going on in America today. It's all ideological, and the system, what was a pretty decent system compared to most of the other options out there, has been captured. It's been weaponized against anyone who isn't for the system, for sure, which that's fairly normal, but also just against some other portion of the people within the system that still support that system, and that creates a a schism mentally as well as socially and politically, and it's problematic. It gets expressed in violence. It gets expressed in what we see today, because people don't know how to deal with it, and there is no way to deal with it, and so many people are caught up and split apart in things that they otherwise shouldn't necessarily have to worry about in terms of their impact on them as an individual, and that's so hard for me to try to express to people that that's so much more important. It really is. It's so much more important that we as individuals are not stressed by the system and putting our energy into the system than the system is itself. And the reality of that is all of the smaller happily existing types of groupings than we have here in America. America is so weird and so different. Some people just don't get it, because I don't think. Well, there's a large portion of America that is so empty, and people can spread out into it, and most people understand that there's a lot of this sort of empty space out there, and they don't necessarily feel crowded. Go to certain cities, and obviously that changes. People are clearly, they feel crowded, and they look crowded, and it's obvious that they are crowded. But I think that's part of it, and I think that part of that is that so they don't see that in other places in the world, they don't have as much space as we do. That nation states in other places are considerably smaller than our 50 states that have decided to unionize together, most other places. And so all of the examples of in places like Europe or the Middle East or any of these places, particularly in Eurasia over there, in and around where they're all landmassed together, where they're not all of one relatively similar culture, where they have all these conflicting ideologies and very little space to spread out in as they themselves as a people grow or perceive that they need to grow, given their growth pattern already. We're growing as a people, so we need to expand out, or we need to increase our border size, or whatever it is. And there's any number of these things that will compile on top of each other. They're going to complicate the situation, but it's something that we don't experience here in America, but we will, though. We will, as we continue to divide along different lines. There'll be places like New York where socialism will thrive. That's the wrong word. But where socialism will be practiced more so than it will be in other places. And it's potential that America could end up like those other countries where you can't trust your neighbor. But we're not at that yet, and so Americans don't feel that. There's no reason for them to feel that. And because it's so big, they're disconnected from everybody else in the world. And not just everybody else in the world, but they're disconnected from each other. They're disconnected from their neighbors. I've expressed, I don't know how many times, that these people in sort of New York don't care about the people in Texas or California or Kansas or whatever, and vice versa. Generally speaking, they have no concern because they don't bump up against each other until some political or social wedge or socially driven political wedge is driven between them. There's not a lot of land or territorial disputes going on between the states, and so people don't recognize that. There's nothing really going on. There are some places where they understand it a little bit more, places like Colorado that have a big river running through them that it feeds further on down through other states, and people making claims to water before it gets to other places, and the other people making claims that they should get water too because it's natural, it flows that way, and that's logical and that's reasonable. But what do you do about it in another state? And there's very little of that going on in any real sense. And supposedly that's what our centralizing is about, right? That's what our federal government is about. It's supposed to be able to reduce or eliminate or solve otherwise any of those disputes between the states, but it's obviously busy. It's got other things going on, and so presumably that breakdown could occur in this system. And again, as I was talking about, because somebody's looking for an event, right? Somebody's looking for one of these triggering events. That's the important part that seems to pop up into some people's heads, because they're waiting for something they're waiting to do something. They don't know what to do. They're lost. They're in this state of confusion because they're constantly being torn in different directions, both politically and socially, and that's on top of the fact that those things, the political and social things, have manipulated the economy, and so that we're all sort of struggling to deal with our own wealth and managing our own wealth, and that's minimized, and so the individual is minimized, and there's all of these things that are just stacking on top of each other that could definitely potentially send us in different directions as a society. But because they are, again, all spread out and all these different non-related interconnected but not related events that don't translate from one space or place, one state, one group of people to another state, to another group of people. And so we get get to a point where most people don't care. Most people just don't care what's happening to anybody else. And they're too busy worried about what's happening to them and their frustration. And that would be good in a non-political situation, because then they're taking care of themselves. They're working and doing what they need to do to make sure that they're taken care of and the people that they're responsible for are taken care of. But that's not what's happening in the political space. The political manipulation gets in there, and it confuses the issue about what is responsible for why the economy is bad, why you're struggling, why it is that you need to be wherever. There's so many different spaces, places, needs, things that any individual wants. So I don't know what it is. It doesn't matter. It's the confusion about why you can't get what you want when those things are not illegal. They're not hard to come by. They're not whatever it is. These are things that are out there that it should be up for grabs for anyone to have, and we're struggling not because we don't work hard, not because we're not putting in the hours every single day, not because our product isn't properly priced. It's because of the manipulations of the market. And I spent all this last hour talking about the economics of things, and I want to just wrap up a couple more thoughts on the economics, and then I want to get into what it is, the sort of dealing drugs. I wanted to talk about what's the crime in dealing drugs, and just go over that. And I'm going to show you a social media post, and we'll go through it. And it's just a super active social media post that I started, and it just kind of took off, and it gave me answers and gave me points to talk about, so I thought we'd share it together. So we'll do that here in a minute. But I want to finish up on a couple more of these economic things, because I'm trying to clarify, even if I stumble through some analogy and get a little bit off track, we're still in the same space, and nothing I say, regardless of my fumbled, failed attempt at an analogy, it changes any of the facts in any of this, and that's what's important. And if you remember, what I said is I took these sort of headlines and produced the important parts of the headlines in my own little bit of notes, and then I give some sort of commentary on each of these things. And I left off with, I didn't tell you where I left off, but I left off with productivity surges while labor costs fall. And this is just another one of these things that's pointing in the other direction. You think, oh, productivity surges and labor costs fall, that's a good thing, but it's actually not, because they shouldn't surge and they shouldn't fall. The trend should be up. The trend should always be up. And just to bring that point home, and I'll come back to this, of course, but just to bring that point home, remember there was I've been talking about the K-shaped economy, and I haven't made a ton of commentary on it, but I've just expressed the idea that it's sort of a bogus argument that they're making about the K-shaped economy, because as long as the economy is continuing to go up, and as long as everyone's standard of living continues to go up, then the K doesn't matter, because everybody is better off than they were before. But there is a point where that breaks down, and there was just this article in the Tampa Free Press that very well describes exactly what I'm talking about when I say that it's not important until we reach this point where nothing is growing anymore. And that's where I think we've reached that point now. And so now the K-shaped economy is a problem, not because it's K-shaped, but because the people at the top of the K, you get what's going on, right? The good economy is going one way, the bad economy, whatever. The lesser economy is going the other direction. These are all very leading and misleading terms. That's why the K-shaped thing is misleading in and of itself, because there's always going to be a discrepancy, and there's always going to be a distance, especially as wealth multiplies, because the rich get richer because they have more money. But also there's the manipulation of the dollar, and that feeds into what their value is and how it's perceived, how much they're making versus how much we're not making, when it's just a normal person like yourself or I who don't have a ton of money, don't have a ton of investments, don't have the ability to take large sums of money and put them at risk to return larger rewards. And so when they stop doing that, when the guys at the top of the K stop doing that, then we have a problem. And the problem is not the K, the problem is the economy. And so while there is a discrepancy between the rich and the poor, as there always are, the confidence index for those with annual incomes exceeding $100,000 fell sharply by 10.5% in a single week, becoming the main reason for the overall index decline. And that's the consumer confidence. And the thing about that is that that's the sort of wealthier, more wealthy people. They're now even concerned about where the economy is going, and they're not certain about exactly how things are going to play out. And you sort of quote, "I think the economy is headed for a soft patch." That's explainable, and all of these other things that I'm talking about really point to that, and they really point to the lie that the economy is getting better, because of course they use the lie that the economy is getting better as a political tool. It's a way to suggest that one side is winning over the other, and so it's a manipulation that's not true, and it's the kind of thing that damages people. It's the kind of thing that leaves people unprepared for what's really going to happen. So I just wanted to follow up with that when I saw that Tampa Free Press article, and I'll share it up there on towardanarchy.com. The link will be there. I'm only a couple of links this time for the show this week, on purpose, and that'll be one of them. I was waiting to find just one more. Something's missing. There's going to be one, and this popped up, and it just perfectly explains it explains why I could say what I said weeks ago, however long ago it was, when I started talking about the K-shaped economy, because it just popped up. It was all of a sudden it's in the vernacular, it's in the popular vernacular, and people are talking about the K-shaped economy, and it's all over the news and this, that, and the other thing. Well, what is a K-shaped economy? Well, it's a pointless way to describe the discrepancy, the disparaging differences, if you will, if you have to, between the rich and the poor. And it's in a socialist system such as we have, or a pseudo-socialist system that we have, that's exactly what happens. If you've got a problem with the K-shaped economy, blame it on your government. It's your government's fault. It's your socialist redistribution of wealth that is the reason for it, and it's the reason for all of these changes. It's one manipulation or another for the government, for the government's favor, destroying our economy, destroying our jobs, ensuring their power, making sure that they have wealth. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but it's criminal. It's gangster. It is. There's nothing like it, really. There have been big manipulations and people who have flexed. Politically, people who have flexed, and some of them have been bigger, meaner than others. But America is in a very special place with its power because it was built on ideology, freedom, independence, the individual, the strength of family, the strength of the individual within the family and the individual within the system, and all that's gone. All of it's completely gone. All of this, it's all just a race to the bottom at this point. I speak to people about the economy, and of course one of the big things with the economy is that there's so much welfare, and there's so many different types of welfare, and that welfare is what draws people to a certain class of people to certain places so that they can get things for free, so that there's a guaranteed net from when they're lazy or stupid or they just don't want to do or they fail. Let's be honest that the idea behind these things is that they're supposed to help people get better, not that they're supposed to just say, okay, well, I have a safety net and then I don't ever have to worry about it. This is the minimum, and I get it, and it's free, and it's all that. And people have problems with this everywhere, depending on who it is that's a recipient of the welfare. So let's just say it's a welfare state that nobody likes, and let's just say, because it is true, that most people believe that we need to defend our borders from immigrants, from people coming across illegally. And these illegal immigrants. The idea is that we have to protect it. Why? Why do we have to protect it? When you ask that question outright, almost nobody gives you a straight answer. And the ones that do give you any kind of a straight answer, they always fall back on the socialism. Well, they come here and they get on the dole. We're not in the UK, are we? They get on welfare, and they vote, and they're not supposed to vote because they're not citizens. And we argue about a lot of things here, especially you and I on the right. You guys on the right there, we argue quite a bit, and we're arguing a lot right now. But we don't argue about the citizens' right to vote. Voting in America is a citizen's right by the documents. It's just a thing. It really is, and it makes sense because it's if being a citizen is anything, it seems like participating in the political system of the place that you're a citizen is probably a pretty good idea. I'm not arguing the validity of these things, whether they're functionally worthwhile or not. I'm just stating a fact. I like to keep it in the sort of factual line. And so when I ask people why do you think we need to defend the borders from immigration, I get lies, I get misdirection, I get very obtuse thinking that is things like, well, you lock your door, don't you? That's not an answer to the question. That's you trying to suggest that I already have the answer to the question. Why would I ask the question if I already had the answer to it? I don't need the answer to it. I know what the answer to the question is. I want your question. I want your answer. I want to know why you think that we need to defend the borders from immigration. And invariably, like I said, it's either they don't answer, they put it off as locking doors, and they describe public property as if it were private property. They describe all the rest of the nation as if it were my house and under my rules, and none of those things are true. And so it's an incorrect. It is not an apt comparison by any means. And it didn't answer the question. It's putting it back on me. And that's not what we're doing if we're trying to have an honest conversation about anything, right? And so, and then the other answer is every single one of anybody who answers that question at all peppers it with something about socialism, about the votes, about buying votes with welfare, about people living on welfare and taking from the system, about people not paying taxes into the system, about them not contributing, about them taking their money and running. All of these things that, true or not, and some of them are true and some of them are not, we're not debating that, are all issues that, one, are not your problem unless you live in a socialist society, and two, can be resolved. You end the reason why they come here. You end the incentive for why they come here by ending the socialist programs. And unless and until you do that, you know what you get? So this is the solutions. You continue to let people come here illegally, because you can't really stop them. So they get here, they come here by hook or by crook in the backs of diesels, whatever it happens to be, crawling underground, whatever it happens to be, boats in the middle of the night. However they get here, and they're here, and you can spend a bunch of extra money hunting them down and losing your what little rights you have as Americans at this point more every single day, or hear me out here. It's an option. You could end the socialist system. How about that? Oh, it's impossible. Oh, stop. Don't. Because then you're going to come to the conclusion that democracy and voting and all the little games that all the little statists play aren't really very valuable. They don't really change anything. You get a little bit of play maybe on the local scene, but you're still just sort of working within a system, a framework that already has set you up for failure. It's already designed to feed itself, to make sure that it's more important than you. And that's only true if that thing takes care of you and you want that thing to take care of you. And supposedly, look, the reason people came to America, all the immigrants originally came to America, is because they could build a dream for themselves, right? There was all the opportunity in the world. There was freedom. There was individualism. And in the community, there was shared responsibility, because you could voice your opinion within the community, and the community couldn't silence you for it, because you had a protected right to participate in the system, and this was all fine on a small scale, but on the larger scale, the macro scale, it's not working. It doesn't work anymore, and that's what you start to see if you start to question what good is there right now in people running around, in armed men running around in masks with guns, snatching people up off the street? I don't care for what reason. You're not going to use that. But we've already I just went through it like just a couple of seconds ago about the whole point is that all the reasons don't matter. There are all those other reasons that they just don't make any difference, because you're not changing the thing that's actually the problem. You're just chasing it's not a cure. It's not a cure. There's nothing. You're just throwing good money after bad money, I guess. If that's something that conservatives seems to understand when you mess with their pocketbook a little bit. But I'm beginning to wonder about that. I'm beginning to wonder if there's even such thing as a conservative in America. There's just socialists and liberals of varying degree, which I think is probably true of reality, but you're not even pretending anymore. There's no There's nobody out there. The anarchist here, this guy is standing up for the idea of individualism and the idea that we are free and should be free to move about unless and until we harm other people or violate other people's property, and that there should be limited or no government whatsoever. We agree on all of these things until I tell you we agree on self-defense, we agree on family, we have this understanding that these things are what built America, and that the reason that people are coming to America now is because of the handouts. Well, you're responsible for the handouts, and I'm sitting here telling you that it's your system that's giving them the handouts, that's bringing them here, that's causing you to spend more money, to lose more freedoms, to chase them down, to put them out of the country, to have them come back next week. That's what's happening here. Don't kid yourself in any way, shape, or form. And somebody says, "Oh, well, they're criminals." Right, except for every time that somebody says that they're not criminals, and then somebody on the right says that, or somebody within the system, one of these sheriffs or heads of some department or something like that, some government department to do with immigration or something along those lines. And they look at us and they lie to us and they gaslight us and they say they are criminals because they crossed our border, because we made it illegal for them to cross our border. Okay, yeah, that might be kind of true, but it's sort of a cart before the horse kind of thing. In America, when you're talking about people have the right to due process, you're claiming that they broke U.S. laws and they're on U.S. soil, but you don't actually use U.S. remedies. You don't offer them the remedies that are offered to everybody on U.S. soil through law, and that's due process. And that's to prove that they have that they don't have a legitimate reason to be here. And that's an entirely different conversation that I want to finish this other stuff and I want to go into these other things. But obviously that's what's at the core of the things that have happened in Minnesota and what's going on in relation to all of the ICE stuff. That's what's at the core of it. And all I see as an outside observer to you clowns on the left and the right is the right giving in to authoritarian controls and sacrificing everything because they're afraid of brown people looking for jobs and they're afraid of dudes who wear dresses. That's what I see. Because I don't see any other valid reason for doing it. Yes, you can criminalize them, but if you criminalize them under American law, then you also have to give them due process under American law. I don't care what you say about it. And if you say something differently, then you're wrong. You do not understand how the law works, and you do not understand how the protections exist and why they exist and why we would have rights and why we would have laws. And you deserve to have your rights and the laws flaunted in your face and removed from you just as you would claim they would be removed from somebody else. Because everything that you give the government power to do today to somebody else is eventually going to be used against you. Or it's going to ratchet up. It's going to be even worse. Because what's going to happen now when the left gets in control? You think that they're not going to go back after the Christians and the right wing and anybody who was against them? You think that that's not going to be the next thing that happens, especially when you have the leader of the right-wing party running around threatening and suing everybody? He's talking about removing them from America and taking their wealth and destroying their careers and none of that has any political validity other than its political power. That's it. There's none of his belly aching and none of his crimes that he wants to cover up by suing or otherwise manipulating manipulating our justice system in his favor, and I don't believe that he's guilty of some of these things. If you want to break down some of the conversations and talk about the things that he was charged for with the felonies and the business stuff, that's all nonsense. It's all garbage. But there are other things. There are certainly crimes that he's guilty of now, and that he will be lucky if the international courts don't hunt him down and try to get at him for it. It would be very surprising. I have to go back to this because I want to finish this. Productivity surges while labor costs fall. And so this kind of falls in line with the market having more people working part-time jobs, and this is a thing that is going on right now. There are a lot more people working part-time jobs. There's a number of things that happen when that happens. One, you can pay them more to do the part-time hours because you don't pay them benefits. There's all these other savings in there. They're also fresher. That can help increase output, so manufacturers can sort of increase their output and the productivity while lowering labor costs at the same time, because they reduce the number of full-time and full hired salaried people, things like that. They reduce those numbers, and then this has a sort of trickle-down effect on the labor, because the laborers can be paid a little bit more because they work less hours, but it's still not as much as was being paid to the full-time guys, to the salaried guys, and because they work less hours, they're more productive. They can produce more during those periods of time because they're not worn out. They're only working half the amount of time. They're only laboring half the amount of time that they normally would, and so they're really fresher, and they can actually produce better on a shorter schedule, and so they take advantage. Laborers, the businesses will take advantage of that as much as they possibly can. There are other reasons for it, but in a general sense, it's all, again, it just falls in line with people having to adjust to a failing economy, to a manipulated economy, to productivity that's slowing down overall, and you don't have to take my word for any of this stuff. You never have to take my word for it. You can go look. You can go find these things out for yourself. I wouldn't say them if they weren't true, if there wasn't, because I don't have a political agenda. I'm not trying to convince you that one side or the other in our political system is right on economics. I'm here to flat out tell you neither of them knows what's going on, and or they know exactly what's going on, and they are looting this burg 6 ways from Sunday, or whatever, 7 ways from Sunday. I don't know what the actual phrase is. I'm sorry. Job report shows economy continues to weaken, and this was very specific. Just like I like that Tampa, wealthy consumers are losing faith in the economy because of the Tampa Free Press. That article's up there. This other one, this isn't going to be up there, but you can go look for it. It's out of Ohio. It's a report. It's a jobs report from Ohio. It says job report shows economy continues to weaken. And this bolsters the idea that it's happening on the larger economy. And locally in Ohio, it shows jobs contracting, which supports my assessment of the economy reflected in the larger natural declining number of jobs available. And because that is one of the biggest things that's happened here recently, is that they're not hiring as much. The jobs are not there. It's not that they're not trying to fill jobs. It's that they're no longer filling the jobs. And the reason that happens is because they have other people covering the job. Just my own wife is an example right now where she works, where they've sort of lost 2 people in this last, let's say, 5 years, the sort of COVID era, if you will. And what a thing to be defined by. And they've lost a couple of people during that period of time directly in support of their customer base, and they haven't replaced them, and it's been hard for the people who are left there, and that's a thing that continues. What happens is that money shifts, and it's already shifted. They're not going to pay somebody else. They don't want to come in. Things are working. If somebody doesn't speak up about it, or if it's just not that big of a deal, or if it's only just sort of bursts here and there of activity, maybe it's a seasonal thing or something, or whatever it is, whatever excuse they can use to just justify not refilling that position. It's just a simple thing that they do. It happens in every business. I don't know anybody who's worked in any business that has gone through any economic changes and downturns or even upturns where they didn't experience the same thing. So many people can go, you know what, I've had to pick up the slack since such and so happened, and they're gone, and now I'm expected to pick up the slack, and they won't hire anybody else, and we all know this is right. So again, I'm not breaking any economic laws. I'm not breaking new ground here at all. I'm telling you the things that should be being told to you in these articles with these relative headlines like this, that's not what they're telling you. They're telling you one side or other of the false economic paradigm, and the false economic paradigm is that the left and right are particularly different in what they do economically. They're not. They claim to be in terms of their expressed value in money and hard work and things like that, but when it comes down to it, when the political system is exposed, you get what we have here today, as the man would say. U.S. factory activity slides unexpectedly. Depends on who you ask. Let's see. So it's a fact that it's the 10th month in a row with readings under 50, and a reading just over 42 is still considered to be on the growth side of the economy. But as I point out to you so often that these things within the economy, so when they spike up, that they're spikes on a downward trend. And so this is exactly what's happening here. It's not that U.S. factory activity necessarily slid unexpectedly. It's that the manipulations of numbers before, the expectations of numbers before, the guesswork that they wanted to base the numbers on, it wasn't quite what they thought it would be, and so they've had to readjust. The numbers, again, for employment were ridiculous. I didn't even pull them up this time to go over them because it was, revised numbers from November, supposedly up 172,000 jobs, actually only up like 98,000. That's a big discrepancy. That's a huge miss on the guess, and it all goes back to what I've talked about before and brought an economist in to prove to you that the government never gets it right on these guesses. Again, you don't have to take my word for it. So you have a reading of 50 on the factory activity scale, the sort of output production of factories, and 42 plus is supposedly supposed to be still on the growth side of the economy. But the fact is that this is all happening on a downward trend of the entire economy. So positive or less than negative readings really mean very little. Again, nothing has changed within the economy to change these things. All right, so I'm just going to spend the rest of the show talking about this idea that dealing drugs, that's a crime, that it's a crime necessarily to sell drugs to somebody, that selling drugs is a criminal activity. Of course, it's been made a crime. It's been criminalized, but what I mean is a crime, when I talk about a crime, is it a crime against an individual? Is somebody being forced to do something that they don't want to do? And of course, it's just like any of the other questions. It's just like the question I asked earlier about, does somebody, what is your reason for wanting to protect the borders from immigrants? It's the same thing. You end up getting people who want to answer the question with a question, or they want to get you to answer the question for them, suggesting that you already know the answer. If you were just smarter, if you would just be a little bit less obtuse in your thinking, which in itself is an extremely obtuse way to think. So it's all very weird to have people suggest to you that what you're engaging in isn't what it is at face value. I asked a question. I expect to get an answer back, not a question, and I expect the answer to be a related to the question that I asked. It should be very clear that you're responding to a particular thing that I said, that you're responding to a particular part of a question, that there's some direct relation to what you're responding to. And that's pretty tough I get upset about it. I get very frustrated when I try to have a conversation. It doesn't matter if it's a digital conversation or if it's a in-person conversation. I don't want to have to get into a conversation. I've said this so many times. I don't want to have to be in a conversation with somebody that isn't an honest conversation, that if we're having the conversation, that there should be a reason for it, and that the reason for it should be ultimately to resolve the differences, to come to a solution. And short of that, and short of honestly recognizing that and working within a truly a Socratic framework for having the conversation, I don't throw those words like Socratic method or things like that out there very often because I don't actively practice them. I know what they are, I know what the questions are, I know how to turn those things back onto people, but I don't want to turn conversation into robotic response, but then you have to at some point because you get people that come along and they want to answer the question with questions. They want to make just be very much they're confusing about what it is you're trying to get to. I don't need the answer to the question. I'm asking you so that you'll think about it. So that you'll consider the notion from my point of view if you're willing to ask. And so if you put the question to somebody or the statement, selling drugs is a victimless crime, and just throw that out there apparently on the social media, you can get 100 comments or more, real comments, not robot comments, not garbage, generally speaking, but a great deal of likes and a number of shares even, and you can get a conversation going. And it's weird because I'm talking about, all right, this is selling drugs is a victimless crime. So it's just the act of selling drugs. Well, if somebody comes to a drug dealer and wants to buy drugs, that's not a crime. They're not violating that person. Nobody's violating anybody there. They may be violating political and social opinion, but that's not the question. And they may be bad actors, but again, that's not the question. I'm asking the basic question. I'm getting to the bottom. I'm going to the heart of the matter. I don't want to beat around the bush at it. The heart of the matter is that two people have interacted. One has wants and needs. The other has wants and needs. They came together and found out that one has what the other one wants and needs, and the other one is willing to pay for it, and they agree to it, and it's mutual, and they're happy, and they get high together, and it's all a wonderful day, and everybody goes home and they're happy. That's a crime, yes, I know, politically and socially, but it's not a crime in the actual law sense of a crime, the natural law sense of a crime. It's not a drug. It's not a drug. It's not a crime to sell drugs to somebody. It is a crime to sell crappy drugs to somebody. If your drugs are laced with fentanyl, cut poorly, that's bad product. That's different. And that's not even necessarily a crime. It's stupid. It could be a crime. You could be liable for damages to actually harming somebody. You could be liable for owing somebody compensation for the difference between what they paid you for the quality of the crap that you gave them. But these are questions that come after the question of whether or not two people making a voluntary purchase between them is criminal. It's victimless. It is absolutely victimless. There's no question of that, because those two people involved are mutually, voluntarily involved in what's happening, and so where's, who's violating whose property has been violated, none of those things. So all the other questions of these instances are some other factor in the basic equation that is a victimless, crime-free transaction regardless of political or social opinion, right? So, some of the answers I get, even when it involves children, that's an open-ended question, even when it involves children. Well, okay, that depends on what you mean. What do you mean by children? What are we talking about? Are we talking about 13, 14-year-olds with their own income, money? Maybe they work a part-time job. They clean around the house. They have money, whatever, and they want to buy cannabis from their brother or somebody, I don't know, their friend. That's relative to sort of somebody trying to sell drugs to like a 6-year-old. Because that's not happening. That's one of the things that they'll claim when you say that it's a victimless crime. Well, they're being sold to 6-year-olds, and it's laced with fentanyl, and it's this, that, and the other thing. And it's all these other things that are aside from the conversation. Of course, the medical pharmacy industry, they're guilty of killing many people because of their drug policy and ultimately the involuntary nature of it. It is the FDA and all the things that allow them to manipulate into the system as opposed to prove themselves in the marketplace with observable results and actions and responsibility for the things that they do wrong, the actions that they take that harm people, that don't produce the results that are all of these things are market forces. These are all things that again follow after the voluntary transaction, or they're extremes. They're pushed to extremes. We've talked about this before, where this is a logical fallacy. So what am I even talking about? What are we even talking about in a logical fallacy when you're saying, but when I say selling drugs is a victimless crime, I'm not saying that there aren't victims of drug use and drug dealers and the drug policy of the American system and all of these other things. But it's not because of the nature of the voluntary exchange between two people who want to buy and sell each other's goods. It doesn't change that fundamental nature or the fact that shouldn't be criminalized. It's the actions afterwards. It's the things that are created by the black market that cause drugs often to harm other people. Instead of it being looked at as a way of dealing with a mental health issue, it's treated as a crime. It's treated as criminal. It's treated as though that these people are less than people when they're not. It's the same with the border argument. The reason that they're called illegals is to diminish their status, to diminish them. Well, the reason they're called drug users is to diminish them. They're not people anymore. They become drug users. They become immigrants. They become something that can be dismissed or manipulated by state power, and most statists, you guys out there, you voters, you people on the right now, don't have to pay the consequence for it, or you have to pay the consequence for it in a way that you don't understand or won't necessarily see yourself. And somebody pointed it out here, and my Social media pages are completely open to the public, and so if you comment on my social media, it can be seen by anyone and can be used out there. So if you say something genius, your name's going to be next to it. If you say something stupid, your name's going to be next to it. If you don't like it, get off my social media. And you can tell that because you can go right to my social media. If you are on Facebook, if you go to Michael Storm 1776, that's my page as opposed to the Toward Anarchy page on Facebook, you will see it's completely open. Anyone can comment, anyone can friend me, anyone can like, dislike, whatever. And they do. They come in and they hit and run like I was talking about earlier. They do these things that they say other people do to them. Mitchell Clark, just a social media friend, he dropped this in. That is an oxymoron. The victimless crime. A crime requires a discernible victim directly harmed by the action. 99% of all laws are simply matters of opinion. I don't know if 99% is the number, but Mitchell Clark is absolutely right. Selling drugs is a victimless crime. Unless you use violence that gives you a monopoly on drugs. That's the state. That is the state. And that is either the state or people who aren't subjected to market conditions for whatever reasons. They've distanced themselves from the market and they've created that space for themselves and they maintain it because it's not an earned space. It's a place that you have to defend. It's a place that you have to hold. Everybody talking about Pfizer. Sean Leal, he's been on the show before. Selling drugs is victimless. He edited my post and scratched out the other words. Selling drugs is victimless. Bill Lightall says there is no such thing as a victimless crime, therefore it's just a business transaction. Beautiful. Most of these were fantastic, but there are others. There's a guy right there. This guy unfriended me, and it's because I told him that he's somebody that he's what he reads to me as somebody who's claiming about these things. He says, not when it's highly addictive like fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, or meth. Many die as a direct result. They're slaves. Some of the dealers use the exact same tactics as pimps, and none of those things are actually verifiable facts. Those are things that happen. Those are realities, but they are not the reality. They are the extreme. They are the ends. They are the things that people will use, manipulators, people who haven't accepted responsibility. If you went through the rest of this reply, there's 30 different replies from all different people, including myself. What you would find, and the guy again, before he unfriended me and ran away, he talked about how he was seeking drugs at the age of 10, but then a drug dealer forced drugs on him at the age of 16. I said, what are you talking about? So which is it, man? Were you seeking out drugs by the age of 10, which is you? That's not on the drug dealer. That's not on anybody else. Maybe your parents, maybe your family. These are all other externalities. These are other forces and things that have come into play that, again, aren't a part of my conversation, and my conversation should be obvious, but of course it's worded and said the way it is so that people will engage in the conversation, and we do get to see these things like this because I told him I didn't really think he could back his claims with any sort of data, and that it was clear to me that his perception of sort of drug dealers and pimps and such were things that he'd acquired from television shows, and just that I'm talking about the action, and that if we're talking about criminalizing voluntary action, then we're talking about more than all of these other things that he continues, that other people get in here and try to push off, but then somebody will push back. Neil, he told him, I lost my daughter to fentanyl, and you know who put it in her body? She did. She owned her actions. No one forced her to. And that's just a fact. It's just a fact, and it's realized by people who have come to terms with those who have been harmed in their life with drugs, by people who have harmed other people with drug use, and by people who have never come to terms with their own addiction and are always looking for somebody else to blame it on. And there was a lot of responses like that in there about people being responsible for what they're responsible for. But then the sort of next response to that same statement and all of these things that came before it that clarify all of this and already talk about how important the transaction is and how important the individual choice is, and that all these things play so much more important of a role in it than just you saying something is illegal. And he says, except meth, cocaine, and fentanyl. Well, that's meaningless. It's pointless. If the dealer sells a clean product, doesn't put their thumb on the scale, that's a beautiful response. Absolutely right. That is a perfect victimless transaction until he puts his thumb on the scale and tries to rip somebody off. Guy says, not when fentanyl is added. Well, what are you talking about? Who's adding fentanyl to what and why? And why is somebody getting drugs from somebody that has cut it with fentanyl or is using fentanyl instead of an alternative, which is cleaner, purer, and less dangerous? Well, it's because of the manipulation of the system. No, selling drugs is a victimless crime because it's not a crime. It's just a transaction. I have to go. It's going to be a fantastic year. I'm looking forward to it. We'll see you next time here on Toward Anarchy.
2 peas in a pod. All voters are the same. Simple-minded fools who think their vote makes a difference. The system's broke, Hank. The election baby has peed in the bathwater. You gotta throw them both out.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network.